Welcome to The Power of Rhythm, a podcast with your host Reinhard Flatischler, founder of Mega Drums, Taketina Symphonic, and a worldwide network of groundbreaking rhythm training. This podcast will offer you an incredible diversity of voices around the one thing that connects us all: rhythm.
Hi and welcome to episode 29 of my podcast. Today I'm opening a new source of wisdom for my listeners. It's a series in which I will be talking to spiritual teachers around the globe. Let's remember, the ultimate goal of rhythm practice is finding emptiness, a place where the abundance of life is emanating from. And it's the place where you can discover who you really are, beyond the mind-made little entity, the I. And that also means this podcast, on the one hand, hosts great musicians, composers, but equally important, it hosts people who are able to inspire you on this quest for wisdom and inner evolution. And I'm excited to start this new series with a great spiritual teacher and friend of mine with whom I shared many significant moments. Mm-hmm. He started as a rebel during the 1971 Maui protests and became a federal fugitive during the Vietnam War. He describes this time as, "I was brought face to face with death. And through grace, I have passed to the other side." And that's where the spiritual quest began. He was actually Kalo Rinpoche, appointed president of the first Kagyu Tibetan Buddhist Dharma Center in Marin County. In the 1980s, he ran a lot of programs in Esalen Institute, clinical hypnosis certification programs, and he was a keynote speaker at the first international Enneagram convention in Stanford. But then in 1990, in India, he met his teacher, Poonja, also known as Babaji, who was actually a direct disciple of the Indian sage Ramana Maharshi. And after learning quite some time under his guidance, Babaji sent him and his wife Gangaji out to give their own satsangs. Right now, he's teaching through the Leela Foundation. Welcome, Eli Jaxon-Bear.
Oh, so good to see you, Reinhard. Thank you for having me here, bro.
Yes, and thank you for this great book. I'm really enjoying reading it.
Oh, good.
It's the rebel that found his home. Let's go to this. At the core of what you and I'm doing with Taketina, it's emptiness and stillness. And I have a very, very great recollection that I shared with you. This is a moment where we have been in Germany, in CIS. This is a center where we have both been teaching. And then I had this tour bus, remember? And you came with green tea. Very delicious green tea. You prepared it. And as we started to drink, and you were sitting right across on the other side, a profound, incredible emptiness and stillness opened up. We'll never forget this. So my first question to you is: emptiness a state that can tear down the veil of illusion?
No.
Okay.
So you can have an experience of emptiness, which is a state, which doesn't tear anything down but sees through. Mm-hmm. So to tear down is to believe that there's actually something to tear down. But when you have a moment of truth, a moment of emptiness, in that clarity, you see through the veils. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing to tear down. But as an experience, it's limited. And so when I answered no, that's because the truth is, the realization of yourself is deeper than any state. And when you realize yourself, timeless and formless, or what you call emptiness, that realization doesn't come and go. But if you don't realize yourself as that, but you have the experience of that, that comes and goes. And that's very useful. It's beautiful, it's profound, it's fantastic. We love those. We all have bliss states where everything disappears. Sometimes it happens in orgasm in sex, or it can happen with psychedelics. It happened with me with psychedelics, for sure. And it's happened in so many other times, of high stress or bliss or moments in nature. But all of those, as useful as they are, and they are so useful, those are momentary experiences. Those are highs. In Sanskrit, it's called samadhi. Samadhi is a bliss state, but it's a state. And what we're here for, to realize yourself, is to realize what is before all states, what is conscious in all states, hell realms and heaven realms, empty and full. And it's so beautiful to see you again, my brother. It's like, I remember that green tea. I remember your tour bus. And Reinhard and I actually taught together somewhere in Hamburg, maybe? Or where was it? We did a Taketina and trance kind of thing.
Yes, exactly.
And Reinhard was at my wedding in a cave in Haleakala on Maui.
That's quite another story. Yes, we have been in Hawaii, in Maui, in Kihei, actually, where we did the workshop. Here I came across the Enneagram that you were teaching there for the first time. For many of my listeners, I don't think they really know what's an Enneagram and what it's good for in evolution.
Beautiful. So let's start with the Enneagram as the earliest system of vibration that we have in the West. It starts with Pythagoras. Pythagoras was a pre-Greek philosopher who really sets the groundwork for what's to come, so that Plato, Aristotle, Socrates all come from the groundwork that really starts with the questions raised by Pythagoras. So Pythagoras walks by a metal shop one day, and he sees someone hammering a bar, and he realizes, octave, that actually to go from one frequency to the next, go from 1,000 to 2,000 in the sound frequency, is to pass through octaves. And he saw that the whole universe is vibrating, and that it vibrates according to mathematical laws. And these mathematical laws are the expressions. His first expression we know is the Pythagorean theorem. It's the only one we know because he never wrote anything down. It was a mystery school where it was passed on when you were ready to receive it. And so it was always a secret. But basically, he saw that the whole universe is a mathematical construction of certain laws that are before Earth, before humans, before us. There's always a triangle, and there's always a Pythagorean theorem. And that everything is vibrating, and it has its own musical pitch. This is Pythagorean from 500 BC, 600 BC, sometime in there, okay?
So you're saying Pythagoras invented or found the Enneagram?
The first drawing of the Enneagram is found in one of Pythagoras' students.
Okay.
He didn't write it down, but the first person who brings it to the West is Gurdjieff, and he explains the harmonics of it, that it's really how vibration changes octaves. So what you find when you go through on a piano keyboard, there are certain black keys missing. Those half notes that are missing, according to the Pythagorean understanding, is where the energy of the original impulse starts to slow down, and it needs an outside shock to keep the energy vibrating, continuing on to its next frequency. So the Enneagram describes that. And it then takes it into the form of human psyche. And the beautiful thing is it gives us the wisdom mirror to see the structure of ego, the structure of our deep genetic character fixation.
So how do you get this transfer from the vibrational laws now to the psychological?
Well, actually, if you look at people, we're all vibrating, of course, and we vibrate at different frequencies. And you know that there's some people that you're in tune with, and some people giving off bad vibes. And the Enneagram gives you the vibrational frequency of each of our animal forms. Because we don't have that many. There's 9 different basic animals, you could say. We're vibrating. So the hysterics, the emotional fixations, have a higher, flightier vibration, and they're up here a little more, and they're, whereas the fear ones are vibrating, and they're a little back here, and they're like this, and the anger ones, like me, this form, is out there and in your face, and it's just, vibrationally, it's heavier, okay? And so you can start to see that the psyche is actually showing vibrational frequencies of egoic fixation.
So you see,
I'm sorry.
There are 9 characters or 9 archetypes or 9, how would you describe?
I would say that we all have, according to Aristotle, we all have 3 bodies of manifestation. A physical, emotional, and mental body. Each of those bodies is vibrating at its own frequency. Our emotional vibrations, we know when someone's going on emotionally. Our mental vibrations, it's electric and in our head. And our physical vibrations, it's in the body and in the physicality and in the physical presence. So those 3 are the 3 basic fixations. So genetically, when we're born, we're either identified physically, emotionally, or mentally.
Okay.
That becomes our center of gravity. It's not that we don't have all 3, of course, everyone has all 3, but there's one that is the central focus that the others then support. So if your physical fixation, your emotions and your thoughts are really in service of your physicality, whereas if your mental fixation, your emotions and your body are in service of your mind. And so then there's just a yin and a yang, an introverted and extroverted version of each of those, and that's how you get 9.
So are you born as an archetype, one of the... How does this happen?
How does genetics happen?
Yeah, how do you, let's say, arrive on this planet as a 9 or a 7 or a 3?
How do you arrive with red hair and blue eyes?
Yeah. Okay, this is just one manifestation of that. And now there obviously is a path that you can go as a 3, or another path you can go as a 7 or a 9 or a 5.
There's no, we're all animals with the same basic drives. That also, this is something that that was taught in Pythagoras' teaching, is that there's 3 basic drives. There's an animal drive for survival. We all have that. There's a social drive for being part of the group, part of the family, part of the herd, whatever it might be. And there's the sexual drive to reproduce. Those are the 3, every mammal has these 3 drives. So when these drives, also genetic, when they start to manifest, they manifest through the structure of the fixation. So that, if you're a mental fixation with a self-preservation drive, you're going to show up one way. If you're a mental fixation with an angry drive, you show up a different way.
That makes sense, yes. And how do you now work? Let's say you have people in the workshop, or people came to explore the Enneagram. How do you work with them in the Enneagram?
First, you find out, what do you want? This is the first question. Most people don't know what they want. They think they want more, better, less, different. More, better, different, let's say. Or less, better, different. Less pain, less suffering, less fear, less confusion, more success, more money, more sex, more whatever. That's what most people want. And all of those are conditioned wants by the society, by our culture. If you grew up in the Kalahari bush, you would have very different wants. So our wants are mainly programmed by our environment and our particular fixations meeting that environment. But to find out what you really want is to go deeper than that. is to ask the essential questions of life. What is the meaning of life when life has no meaning? What's the point of your life? What are you willing to live for? What are you willing to die for? You start to examine yourself. You start to see what's real. You start to see where you've betrayed yourself. And then you start to uncover the fixation, the pattern that continually betrays what you really want for money, sex, and power.
Don't you think that at the core of every human being, there's love, but it's just covered by the fixation or by all this?
Right.
So basically,
at the core, we're all the same.
yeah.
We are all silent, immortal consciousness. But if you believe that, it's a trap. It's a better trap than, hanging out in the bar and getting drunk every day. Better to believe that we are all immortal, silent consciousness. But to realize it is the possibility that we're all here for. And to realize it, you have to be willing to turn away from everything else. Because everything else is the obscuration to the shining of the truth. And that's why it's valuable to know the fixation, because then you know what it is exactly you're turning away from.
You just sent me a very interesting little essay, which is focused around the true friend that you describe of having emptiness, love. What was the third?
Awareness.
Awareness.
So it's not that you have those. See, that's it. The trap is, for all of us, is we want to have these things. I want to have emptiness, awareness, and love so I can be a true friend. Yeah? And that's the trap. So then I develop the imitation of that, which works. Because even if you're imitating truth, it's better than imitating the lie. And so it works, and you get lots of perks from it. People see it, and they recognize it, and they pop, and they, wow, and it's wow. But to realize yourself as the truth of yourself, which is empty, intelligent love, that is itself awareness before being, then you can be a true friend for whatever shows up in your life.
So true.
And where you're not a true friend, where you're some egoic identification of a somebody doing something, to that degree you're suffering. And to that degree you're not transmitting the truth and love and emptiness that you are. You're transmitting me and my opinion, or me and my agenda, or me and the way I see it, or what I want.
It's also an interesting time right now because I see a big split between people diving really into suffering and fixation about the suffering, and other people waking up big time and shedding all this,
Isn't it mind-blowing?
It is
It's such good
mind-blowing.
news. So Reinhard, when you were on Maui with me, it was before I met my teacher, I had never heard of satsang, and I'm sure you hadn't, or anybody in that party in Kihei. We'd never heard of satsang. Now, every yoga teacher is doing satsang. Everybody's got satsang. It's like it's become a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah.
Which is good news and bad news, of course, because the good news of it is that it at least spreads the concept and perhaps the momentary experience of the truth of yourself, and that it's possible to wake up. When we were on Maui, before I met my teacher, nobody even had ever heard of a silent mind.
Yeah,
And now everybody's talking about emptiness and silence. That change has just happened in, you and I were together. We've seen that.
This was a very remarkable meeting, with so many people there that you invited. And first it was like whale watching. I said, what are we doing here? And then, we really dove so deep into so many things, going into nature out and having these amazing ceremonies going on. Have you ever been back to Maui, or you're now?
Oh, We lived there for 7 years.
Oh.
Yeah, we were living there when I met my teacher. We were living on a farm. Oh, the farm that you were at that farm. So we were on that farm for 7 years.
I see. But
You
now,
and I did acid on that farm.
yeah. This is absolutely true. It was a mind-blowing experience. Very high up, half the way up to Haleakala.
Yes.
And this was another amazing thing. Like when you married in the crater of Haleakala, it was pouring rain. And so the people, many didn't come because it was quite strenuous to go up.
All the Americans didn't come. All the Germans and the Austrians came.
Yeah, this was a wonderful time. Are you now in Ashland, right? In Oregon?
I'm in Ashland. And I've got pictures of you in your underwear in that cabin in the mountains because it was pouring rain when we got there. We all got undressed. We built a fire, and we're in our long underwear. And that's when German John showed up.
Yes, exactly, German John. On the horse, yeah.
On a horse, yeah.
Now, let's go to that. You married Gangaji there, and you both...
That was before she was born Gangaji then. She was Tony, right?
I knew her when she was Tony, and I got the whole transition.
Yes.
Now, let me actually go back to this time where you met Punjaji.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about it, because there's so many people I know that have been deeply, deeply influenced by Punjaji. And how was your calling there, your experience there? How did you meet?
Okay. So I was already published. My Enneagram book was doing really well. It's sold out in its first printing in Germany really fast. I was teaching, as you said, at Esalen and in Wien and at Zist and in Japan. I was married to I was not married yet, but for 13 years living with my best friend, my partner, Tony. I had a great life. I had a life people dream about, but I knew I wasn't finished. And I got called. And I didn't know, there was no name Punjaji. There were no, it's like, I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I would find, but I knew I was being called. I was 43 years old. Tony, my partner, said, "You're having a midlife crisis, man. Where are you going? You're going off to..." I had two criteria. I either wanted to meet someone who was more awake than I was, that could give me the final transmission, or I wanted to meet Sufis who knew the Enneagram better than I did.
Okay.
And so, so I was going to go off into, like Kafiristan and into the back country of Pakistan to find the people that I thought maybe knew the Enneagram, Also, I was going to go to find Jagman Kontrol, who was a Tibetan Buddhist I'd received a transmission from when we were on Maui, and he was in Bhutan.
Now, let me ask you one question. You said that the Enneagram came from Pythagoras, right?
Yes,
so how did that came then to the Sufi traditions, the Enneagram?
Actually, I think they learned it from Gurdjieff.
Oh yeah.
But the thing is, here's where it really goes. From Pythagoras, he sets up his mystery schools. When he first sets his first one up in the town, he's kind of outspoken about what he's about, and it creates kind of a revolution in that town. And that becomes a threat to the property owners. And they burn down his school. And from there, he goes from the Greek world, he goes underground, maybe into the Persian world. And he sets up his mystery schools there. And his mystery schools are still going in the Druze. The Druze of Lebanon, actually, their secret religion is Pythagorean. They have the whole cosmology, the vibration of the universe, it's just mind-blowing. And Pythagoras was one of the first people who believed in reincarnation, he said, I never learned anything, I'm just remembering what I knew from my past lives. And so in the Druze tradition, And in the secret traditions of this mystery school, you stayed within, your marriage and your children stayed within the community so that your soul would reincarnate lifetime after lifetime into the same teaching and the same community for your own realization. And so this is where, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought about while you asked me that question.
No, because it's very interesting. Now Gurdjieff comes in.
So Sufis, so Gurdjieff comes in. He must have learned it from the Druze, but he never says. He just says he learned it from a mystery school. A mystery school, he said, in Central Asia, maybe. He was very vague about it. He kept it a secret because basically he took a vow of silence. He was basically breaking his vow of silence and bringing the teaching out.
Have you seen this movie, Meeting with Remarkable Man?
Oh, a long time ago.
It's about Gurdjieff's, life, and he calls about. There's a scene in where he talks about a salmon brotherhood up in the Amudarya River.
That's right. Actually, I read his book way before the movie came out. It's one of his books, and so that's why I was going to find the Sarmoon Brotherhood, which I thought would be in the back hills of Pakistan.
But it took you further on to India, right?
Well, I had to land in Delhi to get my visa to go. I was going to go from Delhi to Lahore, and also I was going to go to meet Jagmohan Kuntrul in Bhutan. So for both of those, I had to get my visa in Delhi. And so that's why I flew to India. I had no interest in going to India at all. I mean, that was just my transit point.
Okay. And then how did you come to?
Okay, so then it's like I was staying at a small inn, and I told the innkeeper in Delhi that I was looking for Sufis. And he said, "Oh, well, there's a Sufi village right down the road here, Nizamuddin." So I took a tempo down to Nizamuddin. It was like driving back in time. Suddenly, I'm in this 16th century dirt road, mud-walled Sufi village, built around the shrine for Nizamuddin, who's a Sufi saint. So I went there. I went to the mosque, and I went to the shrine in Nizamuddin, and I prayed for liberation. And then I went to eat at Kareem's, a restaurant right off the bazaar, behind the mosque. And I was waiting I sat at a table, I'm waiting to be waited on, and another man sits down after I do, and they wait on him first. And it's like, hey, I was here. What? Because I'm a New Yorker. I know about lines. I know who was here first. No, you don't wait on him first. But that's why I didn't say anything, but I felt it. And he felt it. And he said to me, may I join you? And please let me sit at your table, and whatever he's having, I'd like to pay for. And so he sat at my table. It turns out he was a government minister. He was just in town for the day. And his sister writes books about Sufis. And so he could tell me who all the enlightened Sufis were.
Oh, wow.
And he gave me this list, and he drove me in his government chauffeured car back to my hotel. And so I started searching for Sufis. And I met Sufi. I met the head of the Naqshbandi Sufis in Old Delhi, and I went out onto the Gangetic plains and met the Sufis there. I met the Sufis in Nizamuddin, and I never found what I was looking for. And so he said, he was stationed in Lucknow, and he said, well, look, if you don't, I have more names back home. You can always come visit me in Lucknow, and I'll give you more names. And so I went to Lucknow to find him and get more names of Sufis. But while I was there, I had read a book by one of Babaji's students, Andrew Cohen, who mentioned his teacher was in Lucknow, and his name was Poonja. I didn't have the book with me. But since I'm going to Lucknow, I remember that. I called my partner, Tony, back in the States, which was like a huge ordeal to make a phone call from India to anywhere. It's like, it's a 12-hour thing, and when you get on the phone, you can't hear, you're underwater. But she said, his name is Poonja, and that's all I knew. And so I then went down to the lobby of the hotel to get a phone book, but the P's had been torn out. And so I then went up onto I was staying in an old Muslim palace of a minor Nawab of Lucknow. Lucknow was a major part of the Muslim world. And so I went up onto the hotel where there's turrets and towers, and I smoked my holy herb, my marijuana, which I brought with me wherever I went. And I was ready for a vision. And I looked up in the sky and I saw this square black piece of paper kind of just floating on the air. And then it would jerk. I said, whoa, am I tripping? Did it really jerk? Did it really move? And then a red piece of paper, also like floating up on the heat waves. And then they started dancing together. And I knew, that's where he is. I've got to get to that spot. And it wasn't that far from where my hotel was. And so I finally got another phone book, I got directions. I found there was a Poonja, and the Poonja was in the Narhi marketplace not far from my hotel. And so I walked over, asking directions. I knocked on his door, and this sweet, open, good-hearted man opens the door and says, oh, come in, he's waiting for you. Oh, he's waiting for me. Nobody knows I'm coming, but he's waiting for me. Okay. So I go up and I go into his bedroom. I knock on his door. He's sitting in his bed. His room is big enough for a single bed and a chair and some shelves for his clothes. And he invites me in, and he has me sit on his bed with him. And he says, what are you here for? I said, oh, I'm ready to wake up. And he laughed, and he kind of slapped me a little bit, and it was over. I knew in that moment I was looking at my own self.
Yeah.
There was no doubt. This was love looking at love. I didn't know myself as love, but I knew he was love, and I knew he was seeing me and loving me. And my mind stopped. Everything stopped. And I sat on the bed with him. At that point, I had considered myself a Buddhist. As you said, Kala Rinpoche had me run his Dharma center, and I'd been to Japan, where I was given a Zen teaching fan from the oldest living Zen master, which was passing on the Dharma to teach. So I was a Buddhist, and I'm sitting on this bed with a living Buddha, an 80-year-old living Buddha, sitting there looking at me, laughing and loving me. And what does he do? He picks up the Tsin Ming, which is a Chan Buddhist classic. Chan is the Chinese pronunciation of sudden awakening, which the Japanese pronounce Zen. So I'm a Zen student, and he goes to the Chan master and reads to me from the non-dual teaching of this Chan master. And I'm sitting with a living Buddha. I couldn't believe my good luck.
It's fascinating to see, like the first part of your life, you were very much engaged also. Oh, I am the head of this monastery, and I've done this and I've done that. And then all of a sudden here you sit, and as you said, you just look into someone's eyes and realize that you are love and he is love. And
it's over. My search that started in Colorado when I was a federal fugitive from that time you were mentioning, I had an 18-year search to find my teacher. And so you and I were on Maui together just months before I left, I think. Mm-hmm. No, maybe a year before I left. That was maybe 88 when we were there, and I left in January of 90.
This was in 1990. Yeah. Sounds so much like India, but then it's very unique to meet a spirit like that. Ramana Maharshi hasn't talked much, as I have heard. It's just, the being who was sitting, and the rats have eaten his body partly, and he was in samadhi. How did you feel some, transmission from Ramana Maharshi to...
I felt it from Babaji.
Yeah.
The only thing Papaji had on his wall, he had two things on his wall. He had a big poster of Ramana Maharshi in color that he gave to me that's now in my bedroom.
Really? Wow.
And he had a Sri Yantra, which was my logo from the time of when I started teaching in the early 80s. And so wow, a Sri Yantra. Ramana Maharshi, I didn't really know. I knew vaguely, but I didn't know his story. I didn't realize that Babaji was his student. I didn't know any of that. I just knew I was sitting with the living truth.
So
But yes,
back then there were not many people from Europe yet with Punjaji, right?
I was the only one.
Oh.
And my God, I'd eat my meals with him and his family. We'd go on walks together. We'd do everything together. And he would read his letters he would get from devotees around the world. And I would sit with him in his room. He would sit in his chair, and I would have my arms around his legs and sit with him. And he said, oh, this couple is in Varanasi now. They want to come visit. And I said, oh, no, don't let them. No. So they were the first Europeans to show up while I was there. And they were both, they were from London. And Chloe Goodchild, maybe you know her. She does musical things. But anyway.
When did Tony come?
Well, as soon as I got there, I started writing her letters, telling her she's got to come. She's got to meet them. And she said, she would go into bliss from just reading my letter, that the transmission was in the letters.
Wow.
But still, she didn't know. And so I had to fly back. I flew back to get her. And before I did, Babaji took me. I said, look, before I left him, he took me into his room and he said, you've been tested. And he had some fantastic tests for me that I loved. But he said, you've been tested. You stayed true. You're ready. And at that moment, I felt the arising of pride. I knew, wow, this is too much, right? And I felt it. And in that moment, I knew. And I said to him, Babaji, my wife is the Satguru. You have to meet my wife. And he said, okay, good. So I said, but my wife is not a yogi. She's a goddess. I have to find the right accommodations for her. And he said, okay, well, let's go to Hardwar, and you can find the accommodations. I'll wait for you there, and you can go get her. And so we took the overnight sleeper to Hardwar, and where he rented rooms on the Ganga. And I went and found the best place for her, which was the tourist motel, which was like, like taking you into the inner city of Detroit, with didn't have gunshots, but, it was... But anyway, that was the best place in town I could find. And so then he waited there, and so I was there in January to February of 1990. I went home and brought her back in April. So March, I did my retreat on Maui, where Sabrina and Christina, who became, what was Christina's name with Papaji? Anyway, she was a heart surgeon in Munich, who was one of my students, who became Papaji's devotee and stayed with him, lived with him, and took care of him. Yamuna. So they all met me on my return from meeting Papaji, and I just brought them all back with me to India. So Sabrina and Yamuna and the whole crew came back to Hardwar with me.
Now, we had really the luck to travel India at a time where it's almost possible, and where it was still the old India, where you could find saints like this. Now, today, in this very situation, I see a lot of desperate people, angry people, depressed people. What can we give them from the abundance we have learned? And you here, my honored guest, and I would be very happy if you had something for the listeners. Like if you are in a situation like, get angry, you get depressed, and you get fearful.
If you're suffering in any way.
Yeah, if you're suffering, exactly.
And, people will say, well, I'm not suffering, most of my life is really good. But I'm not talking about the most of the part that's really good. I'm talking about the other part, the part that's not so good, the part where you're suffering. If you're suffering, that is a disease of ego. The possibility is to wake up from your egoic identification. And the only way is not by listening to anybody else, not by reading anything else, not by going to India or going anywhere else. It's your own direct self-investigation to find out who you are, what you are, where you are. Because right now, if you're suffering, you're living in a trance. And in that trance, it's a sleepwalking trance, and you're dreaming you're awake. And in dreaming you're awake, you believe that who you are is your name and your body and your thoughts and your feelings, and where you are is your physical location, and what you are is a human being. That's the trance induction. None of those are true. They're relatively true, but relatively is where you're suffering. If you want absolute truth, there's no suffering in absolute truth. There's bliss, there's happiness, there's fulfillment. You can say, if you can say, I am completely fulfilled, your work is done. There's nothing left to do. There's always more to realize. There's always more, there's always depths. But to get to the level where you know you are already fulfilled, there's nothing left to do. There's no tomorrow. There's no yesterday. There's nothing you need from the next moment. That's fulfillment, that's happiness.
And even knowing, even knowing that you don't have to get rid of this or that or make this right or wrong, just dive down to the freedom.
Yeah, getting rid of this and that is still in the realm of the trance. It's as you imagine there is a this and a that.
Yes, I'm still seeing, I don't know how this will continue, because people that I see around here is so kind of on the edge with their existence and the anger driven and all of that, you know, and it gets worse and worse because the politicians don't listen to them. What can
Well, you know, it's the end of the empire. Since World War II, we have been living in the American empire. It's a world culture. That's why we're speaking English right now. We're not speaking Chinese. That'll be the next generation. But for this cultural empire, it's English. And everyone in the world, if they're going to do business, which is the American way, you speak English. So rock and roll was the greatest import of American culture to the world. It showed up in Soviet Union. It showed up everywhere. That's all part of the American empire. It's the good part. So as this empire collapses, crumbles, it causes dislocations in the human psyche. It causes enormous issues of survival. It causes enormous fear and panic and depression and despair. And that is both the good news and the bad news. The bad news of it is that the tendency then is to follow the strong leader who will get you out of it, who will show that you're a victim, it's not your fault, and the strong leader will take care of you. That's what Trump is. So that's the one way it goes. The other way it goes is that if you are true, a good human being, and you're still lost in the despair of what to do, that's your own spiritual ripeness. That's your own cataclysmic opening to discover the truth. See, because to discover the truth, you have to give up the illusion. And to give up the illusion is what we call to be disillusioned. So to be disillusioned is painful. If you see through the church, you're disillusioned with the church, it's both liberating and it's painful.
Absolutely.
And that pain is the way in to being disillusioned with yourself. And when you're disillusioned with yourself, when you're willing to give up your own, just like you gave up the church, you give up your own personal identity, it's both painful of what I'm going to lose and what will I not get, and it's so liberating that it's worth the pain, just like it was worth the pain to leave the church.
If it goes good, where can we go from where we are right now? You say it's the end of the empire. So in what kind of form of life together, living together, can we dive
Who can say?
into?
Who knows? Who knew that you and I would be able to talk like this live on television.
Yeah.
That's my God, you know? Who knew? When I went to India, when we met in Maui, there were no cell phones.
Right.
So no internet. We didn't know about India. Now it's all online. It's a whole new world. How will that impact us that you don't have to go to India, that all the sacred teachings are online? Well, that's both good news and bad news. It both cheapens it and it makes it available to everybody.
Absolutely. And I think the diving into here and now is the only thing that really is real, just this moment. And you will see where it transports us to, right?
So, may I on that?
Absolutely.
So the question is, who is diving into what? So to dive into here and now is to assume that you're somewhere else. Where are you before you dive into here and now? You know? So then you start to examine, how do I imagine that I'm separate from here and now? So that it's a blissful experience to suddenly just drop into emptiness. It feels good. Everything's gone. It's blissful. But it doesn't last, because then there's the next moment where you come back out. And so rather than, well, that's beautiful, diving into here and now. In truth, by the time you hear these words, it's already past. Where's the here and now? By the time they hit your ear, it's already over. So here and now can never be in the material. The material is always the past. By the time the sense organs receive the information from the material, the sound, the color, whatever it is, it's past. So to be here and now is to be without here and now, with no one here and no one, and there is no now.
Yes, it's timelessness. This.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm so glad. So good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. And I have to say, wow, I've seen your paths for so long now, and I have a very, very deep respect how you're going. And tell us a little bit about current life with Gangaji and you. You're both in.
Wow, we live in Ashland, Oregon, which is a little hippie town on the California border. It's like,
I've been a lot of times, like I've been teaching for 10 years in Portland, Oregon. So I know, Ashland, all this. It's a nice coast, beautiful coast.
Beautiful coast, yes. And the town is still, see, we were living in Marin County in California, but it was too expensive for people, and it got to be too much about money. And Ashland is like what Marin County was back in the 70s, it's loose, it's laid back, it's hip. And for the first time since the 1980s, in April, we've been in quarantine and we haven't traveled. I mean, 1980s, I was going to Estland 2 months a year. I was going to Austria and Germany a month or two a year. So I was on the road since the 1980s. Now, for the first time, Gangaji and I are living in our perfect environment without traveling. Wow, it's incredible. It's a whole new world has opened up for us. It's fantastic.
That's so true for me too. I have been traveling like 3 times around the globe. Finally, It was insane, and I felt something need to change. And then last, I think it was April, when I came back from Brazil, everything went to lockdown. And as I'm now married with my beautiful Anna, who is a flautist, and we live here, and we have been so creative, and so much meditation, creation has happened, and stillness has happened, and everything has changed completely. I love it.
It's so beautiful. I'm so happy for you.
And I
have a picture of your old girlfriend on the boat with us when we went out whale watching.
Yeah, this was Hydron.
Hydron. I have a picture of Hydron.
Yes. Now, it's a very important time for me back then, because it just blew the lid of so many things I didn't know that existed, And you're really the guy who knows the drugs a lot. I did it in a very young age. Then I stopped it totally. And we did some very nice journeys there, that really opened up.
When you first landed on the beach, right, in Kahului. That was our the pre-wedding gathering. We had you and Sven, who had been inviting me to Austria, and Wolf. I don't know if Wolf was there. Yeah, Wolf was there. He came.
Wolf was there, and a Hungarian professor.
Was running the New Age world in Hungary, in Budapest, and we all did. I think we did either acid or ecstasy, depending on who you were. Sven, I gave a whole bunch of mescaline to, and he was tripping all day in his chair on mescaline. I don't know if you got ecstasy or acid. I'm not sure, but everybody got something, and we just in a beach house in this paradise. That was really fun.
It started really off a lot of things, and so after that you went to India, right? This was.
Yes.
I hope when everything opens up that you come over again and be at the house here with Gangaji. Do you plan to travel, or you don't want to do this anymore?
It's over,
Do you have a center where people come and have satsang, or?
Yeah, well, right now everything's online and it's working really well. And then eventually when it opens up, people will come here. I can't go anymore. I mean, I really have done it, I mean, I edited it up, and it's like I lived 3 years in Baden-Baden. If you add up all the months I was there, it comes to 3 years I lived in Baden-Baden. It's like, whoa, wow. That was hard on my body.
Yes, I imagine. So, thank you so much for coming.
So come here. Hey, listen, come and visit,
I will, for sure.
Do your classes here, of course. Everybody, Taketina would be a big hit in Ashland.
I have a lot of students over there who want me to come back. I was actually planning to go last July, but of course, you know what happened, of course. Mm-hmm. So we have postponed it, but we will show up for sure.
Oh, good.
So actually, I want to thank you very, very much for your time and showing up here, How do you get Eli Jaxon-Bear online? It's great. Please give my love to Gangaji.
I will. So good to see you again.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom that I really deeply appreciate.
Thank you so much for having me as a guest on your show. Taketina rules.
Yes, also to our listeners, a rare occasion to get Eli Jaxon-Bear here, Every path from the advanced hypnosis to Enneagram, and finally, really, it's visible for me. You found it. You are it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, if you like the podcast, visit us. It's powerofrhythm.com/podcast. Leave a comment. Where can they contact you, Eli?
Contact me.
Yeah.
Well, Leela Foundation. If you Google me or Google Leela Foundation, you'll find. Also, there's a school now that is running in Sydney and in Amsterdam and here in Ashland for training therapists and training true friends and helpers.
So really check that out. You will find a big source of wisdom, and that can really help you a lot right now. So with that, all the best. Thank you.
May everyone wake up and be happy and free.
Acha.
Acha. Yes.